Before the United States existed as a single nation, the American colonies were a patchwork of different economies. People used a confusing mix of currencies to buy and sell goods. British pounds, Spanish dollars, and even French livres were all in circulation. This created a great deal of confusion and made trade between the colonies incredibly difficult. Imagine trying to run a shop where every customer paid you in a different type of coin, each with its own fluctuating value. It was a chaotic system that hindered economic growth and made simple transactions needlessly complicated. The need for a single, unified currency was becoming increasingly apparent to the leaders of the emerging nation. The Spanish dollar, often called the Piece of Eight, was particularly popular in the colonies. It was a large silver coin, widely trusted for its consistent weight and purity. These coins were so common that they became a de facto standard in many parts of America. People would even physically cut them into 8 pieces, or bits, to make smaller change. This practical, everyday use of the Spanish dollar laid the groundwork for America's own future currency. When the time came to create a national mint, the Founding Fathers looked to this familiar and trusted coin as their model, seeking to create something that the public would readily accept and understand. The American Revolution was the catalyst that turned the idea of a national currency into a necessity. To fund the war against Great Britain, the Continental Congress began issuing its own paper money, known as Continentals. However, these notes were not backed by gold or silver, and the government printed them in vast quantities. As a result, they quickly lost their value, leading to runaway inflation. The phrase "not worth a continental" became a common expression for something worthless. This disastrous experience taught the new nation a harsh but vital lesson about the importance of a stable and trustworthy currency, one that would not be so easily devalued. Therefore, when the United States Constitution was drafted, it granted Congress the power to coin money, regulate the value thereof. This was a crucial step. In 1792, the Coinage Act was passed, officially establishing the United States dollar as the country's standard unit of money. It was defined in terms of a specific amount of silver, directly linking its value to the Spanish dollar that people already knew. This act created the U.S. Mint, and began the production of the first official American coins. The new dollar was designed to bring order to the economic chaos, unify the young nation, and build a foundation of financial stability for the future. For much of its early history, the value of the US dollar was directly tied to precious metals. This was known as a bimetallic standard, where the dollar was defined by a certain amount of silver or gold. People could, in theory, take their coins or paper notes to a bank and exchange them for the equivalent weight in physical metal. This system was designed to inspire confidence. It assured the public that their money had real, tangible value, unlike the worthless Continentals of the Revolution. This link to precious metals was the bedrock of the American financial system for many decades, providing a sense of security and stability to the growing economy. The 19th century brought significant changes, most notably the widespread introduction of paper money. While early forms of banknotes existed, the federal government began issuing its own paper currency, called greenbacks, to finance the Civil War. Initially, like the Continentals, these notes could not be exchanged for gold or silver. This led to public suspicion and a difference in value between the paper notes and metal coins. After the war, the government worked hard to restore faith in its paper money. The decision was made to return to a metallic standard, eventually adopting a pure gold standard in 1900, which promised that every dollar was backed by a fixed amount of gold. The creation of the Federal Reserve System in 1913 marked another pivotal moment in the dollar's history. This new central bank was established to provide the nation with a safer, more flexible, and more stable monetary and financial system. The Federal Reserve was given the authority to manage the country's money supply, issue new currency, the Federal Reserve notes we use today, and act as a lender to other banks to prevent financial panics. This represented a major shift from a rigid metal-backed system to a more managed and elastic form of currency, controlled by a central authority rather than the fixed supply of gold. The Great Depression of the 1930s forced the most dramatic change of all. To combat the economic crisis, President Franklin D. Roosevelt took the United States off the gold standard for its citizens. It became illegal for individuals to hoard gold, and paper dollars were no longer redeemable for gold coins. While the dollar remained linked to gold for international transactions, this was the beginning of the end for the metallic standard. The dollar was transitioning into a fiat currency. money that has value simply because the government declares it does, and because people have faith in that government. This monumental shift gave the government far more flexibility in managing the economy. At the beginning of the 20th century, the British pound sterling was the world's most important currency. The British Empire was vast, and its financial center in London dominated global trade and finance. Most international contracts were priced in pounds, and many countries held their reserves in sterling. The US dollar was still a largely domestic currency, albeit for a rapidly growing industrial power. The two world wars, however, would completely reshape the global economic landscape. Britain exhausted its wealth fighting the wars, borrowing heavily from the United States, while America's economy boomed, supplying the Allies with goods and growing into a formidable industrial and financial giant. The turning point came in 1944, towards the end of the Second World War. Delegates from 44 Allied nations met at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to design a new international economic system for the post-war world. They sought to create stability and prevent the kind of economic chaos that had contributed to the war. The United States, with its immense economic power and vast gold reserves, was in the dominant position. The agreement they reached, known as the Bretton Woods system, established a new order. It pegged the currencies of other nations to the US dollar, which in turn was convertible to gold at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce. This agreement officially enthroned the US dollar as the world's primary reserve currency. Central banks around the globe began holding dollars instead of gold as their main reserve asset. International trade was increasingly priced and settled in dollars. If Japan wanted to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, for example, the transaction would be conducted in US dollars. This created immense and constant demand for the currency, cementing its importance far beyond America's borders. The dollar became the anchor of the global financial system, providing a stable standard of value for international commerce and investment in the decades following the war. The Bretton Woods system lasted until 1971. The costs of the Vietnam War and growing domestic spending led the US to print more money, weakening the dollar's value. Other countries became concerned that the US no longer had enough gold to back all the dollars held overseas. President Richard Nixon unilaterally ended the direct convertibility of the US dollar to gold. While many feared this would cause the dollar's collapse, the opposite happened. The world had become so reliant on the dollar for trade, especially for oil, that it simply continued to use it. The dollar became a free-floating fiat currency, its value determined by supply and demand, but its central role in the global economy remained firmly in place. In our daily lives, the dollar is the fundamental tool for nearly all economic activity in the United States. We use it without a second thought to buy groceries, pay our rent, and fill our cars with petrol. Our salaries are paid in dollars and our savings are counted in them. It is the unit of account for everything from the price of a cup of coffee to the value of a house. This everyday utility is the most basic function of the dollar, serving as a medium of exchange that allows our complex modern economy to operate smoothly. It simplifies transactions, replacing the need for a barter system where goods would have to be traded directly for other goods. Beyond personal use, the dollar is the lifeblood of international trade. Many of the world's most important commodities, such as oil, gold, and coffee, are priced and traded in US dollars. This means that countries around the world need to acquire dollars to buy these essential goods, regardless of whether they are trading directly with the United States. This arrangement, often called the petrodollar system, creates a constant global demand for American currency. It gives the United States a unique position in the world economy as the provider of the currency that keeps global commerce moving. Furthermore, many countries choose to hold US dollars as their main foreign exchange reserve. Central banks in nations like China, Japan, and the United Kingdom keep vast sums of dollars in their vaults. They do this because the dollar is considered a safe and stable asset. In times of global uncertainty, investors and governments alike tend to flock to the dollar, viewing it as a secure place to store their wealth. This safe haven status reinforces the dollar's strength and stability. Additionally, some countries have even adopted the US dollar as their own official currency, a process known as dollarization, to stabilize their own volatile economies. In summary, the dollar's journey from a colonial silver coin to the world's dominant currency is a story of power, trust, and practicality. Its importance today is multifaceted. It is the primary currency for global trade, the main reserve asset held by central banks, and a safe haven in times of crisis. While challenges from other currencies like the euro or the Chinese yuan may emerge, the dollar's deep-rooted position in the architecture of the global financial system ensures its continued importance. For the foreseeable future, the greenback remains the undisputed king of currencies, the standard by which all others are measured.